Milostivi čovekoljubi Bog, i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods are high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems. Giants walking, angels and demons fight. Only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold. Mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold. From valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to Mysteries and Majesty. Study with us, don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy, and horror. Dungeons and dragons to Skyrim and Mordor. Phantom powers haunt the evening in gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and Majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
For decades, there have been mysteries, deaths, and disappearances throughout national parks of America. So much that different people took it to their own task to start researching about these things. So that so far we have at least 3 official documentaries when it comes to 411 missing cases. We have a bunch of books. We have so many articles, forums, and blogs. People are becoming, quote unquote, obsessed with these things. And it's not without a reason. It's not like if someone who is ignorant when it comes to wilderness and nature like me would get lost, that wouldn't be so weird. But when you have a lifelong, a trapper, a camper, and a hunter getting lost without any trace, where even dogs cannot find their scent, cannot sniff anything, then it becomes so weird, especially when the details about missing cases throughout the whole country and from state to state, from national park to national park, have so many similar details. Then people start thinking, well, could it be something odd, something fringe, something supernatural? So welcome to episode 129 with my voice and throat that give me trouble, but I'm a fighter, right? I'm victorious. So I'm here to co-host this episode with wonderful Saint Sean and Pastor Ben. Welcome you, brothers. Please subscribe to Ben's Thoughts YouTube channel. I provided the link. Thank you, everyone, for your kind words in the live chat. Before we start diving into, we have easily a dozen of those missing cases for tonight. Pastor Ben, when we are talking about this case, many people are skeptical, and that's fine. I want to state myself as, when it comes to so many of these mysteries, that I'm an agnostic and I'm willing to change my opinion, either left or right, whatever the evidence comes my way. But according to you, and you being a person of faith, and you being a shepherd of people's souls, and then people are disappearing. Some of them, their bodies are never found. Some of them are found. People are grieving. People are scared. It is a great mystery. Why, according to your understanding, it's important for us to study this topic for tonight?
That's a really good question. So, regardless of, I guess, how you feel about the way these cases have been documented and researched, the methodology behind them, the fact still remains that 600,000 people a year go missing in American national parks. 600,000 a year, right? Like that's just a statistical fact. And you're like, how can it be that many and nobody notice? And it ties into the fact that the national parks don't have any kind of a database. They don't even necessarily have to report it or even know about it when a lot of people go missing at first. And so there is no FBI investigation in a lot of these. There is no anything. People just drop off the face of the earth. And that obviously matters, when that many people are going missing every year, completely unaccounted for. That, makes you want to sit up in your seat and say, something's not right. That makes a difference. When you think about the whole community that I live in, right? And the little town that I live in has a population of probably around 600. The biggest city to me has a population of about 3,000. Okay. So when 600,000 people, can go missing in a year, and we're pretty close to Yellowstone, where I live. And that's one of the main places where people are going missing. Like, that's huge. You could take everybody in my county, the county north of me, and probably, the next 2 counties below me, and you still wouldn't hit 600,000 people. Like, that matters. And so as a pastor, as a man of faith, part of me wants to know what's happening to them, where are they going, how can I prepare, people that I minister to, because we live outdoors here. We're always going out into the woods. My backyard, a 5-minute drive, and I'm in, a state forest. So this stuff is really relevant to just where I live and the people and the family that I have around here. So I want to know why they're going missing, where they go, especially when we don't ever recover them. Because this could be one of my friends. This could be one of my neighbors. This could be an acquaintance that I run into at the gas station. It really is applicable to me and the people around me, just due to the nature of the area that we live in.
Yeah, thank you for that intro. And unless I'm wrong, I think in one of the documentaries I was listening and taking notes for tonight's episode, man, there's stuff even happening in your state, in Idaho. I'm like, man, like, better Ben be on guard, or like, what's happening out there? Better he be praying and fasting. I'm kidding. Well, kidding and not kidding, but I'm like, like you said, in your backyard, maybe, like you said, 5 minutes to the wilderness, and Yellowstone Park is not that far. So it's like, well, how many stuff we don't even know that's happening out there. So I guess we have to be vigilant and prayerful. See, in Chicago, we don't have much wilderness, so that doesn't happen. We do have in Illinois, but not in Chicago. But then you have kids and teenagers disappearing for different reasons. That's also scary. It may not be supernatural or cryptids behind it or something, but it could be the same sinister force and mind behind all of that, just working in different states and in different regions through different ways. But if it's the same kraken, just having different, limbs, different, whatever you call tentacles, if it's the same head, the same mastermind behind that, so the way you would pray in Idaho and I'll pray in Chicago may have a lot of similarities, even though we don't have woods, but still kids and teenagers are disappearing. We get those Amber Alerts. We got it one like about 10 days ago. It was like 2 a.m. So things happen everywhere. So we have to be prayerful for our kids and teenagers. Sean, when it comes to your perspective, why is it crucial that we're talking about this topic? Is it only because we like cryptids and horror stories and supernatural stuff, or could it be something more real?
Well, the cryptids and the horror stories are definitely a big part of it, right? But it has a real impact. There are people whose lives have been upturned because their loved ones have just disappeared. And when You send search teams who dedicate hours, if not days, to looking for these people, and they come up with nothing. It's like they just vanished. And so, whether or not you interpret these stories as having a supernatural cause, at the end of it, you have a grieving family. And so we have to be attentive and understand that this is happening to, I mean, 600,000 people, like what Ben said. I didn't know that number. That's crazy. That's a lot of hurting families. That's a lot of tender hearts. And so we have to be able to pastor those people, and we're not going to be able to speak into their life if we're not even aware that this is a phenomenon that's happening. And so I think part of it is just drawing awareness to the fact that this many people are just turning up missing. And, maybe the other part, the kind of conspiracy theorist part, is why is it always happening on government land? What's going on there? And I think that to be wise and to understand the authorities that are in charge may be sequestering off this land because they have our best interest in heart. They don't want us going into these places that happen to be places where people are just disappearing. And so maybe there's a reason that there's no private property in that area. And so, yeah, just this kind of balance between the cryptids and the conspiracy, and then just having this awareness that we're going to be able to love on our friends and neighbors if something like this should happen. And at the frequency that they're disappearing, the odds are pretty good that somebody, or at least are one or two steps removed from somebody who this has happened to. So, yeah, I think that's kind of why we're discussing this here. I mean, it's appropriate for the channel, but more than anything, just to draw awareness, attention, and to be able to lead people and speaking life into people that have had this happen to them.
For sure. And even though we may have fun and we may, include some theories that are wild, or, just for the sake of dissecting them, our hearts, can always sympathize and should sympathize with victims and bodies of the people that are never found, either national parks or cities. And I would just say, I don't know if it will be worse if someone of my beloved ones disappears, and if I would find out it was for the sake of the cult, or a serial killer, or just a gangster who was like raping and killing, or if it's something supernatural, like whoever and whatever is the cause. If your beloved one is dead, whatever is behind it, it still hurts you and grieves you. And I'm just reminded of the Bible and the God returning the justice and being vengeful on our behalf one day. I also want to add this. When I was listening, Pastor Ben, I just Googled quickly, and I'm on the website strangeoutdoors.com. And it says NAM-US, which is National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, has said that more than 600,000 persons go missing in the United States every year in all circumstances. Around 90% of these missing people are recovered annually, both dead or alive. However, tens of thousands remain missing for more than 1 year, according to NAM-US. And I also want to say, before we start going with the first case, that the reason why these documentaries and books and stories are called 411 missing cases is because the director assistance came to be known as information. And by the early 1980s, 411, which is usually pronounced 411, was being used as a slang term for just that, information. And then when you connect 411 or 411 with the unexplained or unsolved disappearances and mysteries in national parks, you get these documentaries, stories, and books of this sort. So that's the background of why the name is like that. Okay, so for this cause, I watched 2 documentaries and I took a bunch of notes for about 10 missing cases. We'll see if we can cover everything tonight. because of my health, but also because I want to allow Ben and Sean to speak their mind, but we can always do the sequel. So there are over 400 national parks in the USA. During the investigation of the first documentary, which was made in 2016, the documentary crew requested a list of missing people from the National Park Service. They told the crew that no such list exists and that delivering one would cost $1.4 million. So I don't want to go in politics, but we have money to send to abroad countries for whatever, but we don't have almost $5 million to make a list of missing people, as if that's not crucial. I mean, I'm speechless. But let's go with the first case. On July 10th, 2000, a family which was parents, a great-grandpa Bob, his friend Isaac, and a kid. The whole family and the friend were camping in Salmon Chalice National Forest in East Idaho, and their 2-year-old son, Dior Coons Jr., went missing when some of the family members went fishing. Frank Wilt, a private investigator, was hired by the family, but he did not find any clothes, any footprints, body remains, nothing. Chief Deputy Steve Panner spoke of his search and rescue team not finding anything either. It seems as if the boy was snatched out of the sky. They also used dogs and a helicopter crew that had infrared technology for the night and still did not find anything. What if he fell into the creek? That was one of the questions. But they checked it as well as wolf and bear dens and eagle's nests because, as we know, huge eagles, they can take even little children or goats and sheep. Big eagles, they can carry that much weight. But again, no results. Witnesses say that the boy was clumsy and had uncomfortable boots, and that these characteristics would prevent him from walking too far from the camp. Animals usually leave traces of something: blood, clothes, anything. Every family member was cooperative with the officers, and there were no red flags per reports. After 3 days, the parents went to the East Idaho News and told their story. Then they went to the vigil and back to the camp to search for their boy. Going to their great-grandpa's friend Isaac, who was probably the weirdest person in the documentary, he refused to answer the questions when the news reporter knocked on his door. He also never went to seek the boy. He has a prior conviction for a sex crime. The parents never met Isaac until this camping trip because it was the grandpa who brought Isaac. He seemed a bit off, potentially having some cognitive or mental issues, and was a bit slow. However, he agreed to be interviewed for the sake of the documentary. Shockingly, little Dior's great-grandpa laughed at being asked if he knew where Dior was. And when I watched the documentary, I was honestly shocked. I was like, this is your blood, this is your great-grandson, and you're laughing when the crew is asking you. Oh, I'm not saying he's involved in anything. How can I know that? But that was so cold-blooded. So again, people start circulating different theories. They went from local sex offenders to Bigfoot, to a trucker picking him up, and finally to the parents. Online folks have been cruel by accusing the boy's family of being drug addicts and sleeping with certain people. Frank Wilt, the family's private investigator, found it very strange that the boy's parents stayed away from media and the news instead of going there often to beg for help. That forced Frank to withdraw from the investigation since he couldn't trust them anymore and since they refused to allow him to make the case national. So now Isaac, great-grandpa's friend, he's weird. Great-grandpa is weird. Parents are weird. Like the circle of suspicious people is getting even bigger. Frank, the investigator, sent them a memo or an email telling them that he thought they both lied. And you can see when you watch the documentary, you can see a section from that fax or email, whatever it was. Moreover, they did not allow to the private investigator to advertise the $20,000 reward for their son. They just didn't want that to go in the news. And that's another weird thing. The boy's father admitted to his fiance's female friend, Kelsey, who was investigated for this documentary, that he did not believe his fiance's family, that he didn't believe his fiance's family or Isaac. FBI came 3 or 4 weeks after the case started. The boy's parents said they weren't afraid of them since they had nothing to hide. As mother retells the story, she said at the very camping site, she asked her grandpa to leave the boy with him, while the rest of them, so the couple that was supposed to marry, and Isaac, great grandpa's friend, so the three of them would go to check the fish in the creek. As the boy started following the three of them, then later he decided to go back to his great grandpa, who was still sitting in his chair in the camp. But the creek is not far from the camp, yet the boy suddenly disappears. There was no scream, no signs, no footprints, nothing. Parents were tested on polygraphs and there were no results. Their answer regarding them not showing on TV more often was that they wanted to be on the site looking for the boy and not to draw attention to themselves. FBI found nothing to indicate a crime had occurred and did not take over the case. And basically to this day, that's all the information we know. So again, basically everyone on that campsite seems suspicious. The parents, the great grandpa, and his friend Isaac. Now, you should not judge or be suspicious necessarily towards someone who had in the past criminal file. There's an older Latino gentleman in my church who was a gangster and even a murderer. He was in the news many, many decades ago when he was part of this gangster, whatever was the gangsters group's name. But God met him, at his lowest level. He repented. He changed his life. Now he's going to prisons and preaching to gangsters about Christ. And some are surrendering their lives to God through this gentleman. So what I'm saying is we don't have to judge someone based on their past. Yet this guy is in general suspicious. So what are your thoughts on this whole case, Ben? And then we can switch to Sean.
So, yeah, like the grandpa's friend is super suspicious, even in the documentary. Something that's not covered, I think, in the documentary, but I found from outside sources point out that the grandpa actually had early onset dementia at the point that this happened. And so it was never even really established that he heard, because it was deal they got the 2-year-old, and he's running around and he's wearing these big boots that are too big for his feet, and they want to go. Everybody, I think, maybe all of them, maybe not grandpa. At any rate, they all went into town to go to the store, and all of them went together for some reason. So they were all seen together at the nearest store to pick up, some drinks or whatever. And then they go back out to their campsite. Grandpa sits down in his chair. He doesn't want to get up. The rest of them are going to go down to a river that's a short walk away from the campsite to scout it out and see if there's any area that they look like might be good for fish, because they're going to go fishing. Well, as they're walking down towards the river, the little boy, Dior Jr., says, I don't want to go. And so the mom reportedly says, okay, go back to grandpa, yells at grandpa, hey, Dior's coming back to you, and watches her little 2-year-old run back up the short trail, very short trail, back to grandpa. And she turns around as he's running that way, and she goes out to, the river or lake or whatever it is, with the rest of the people camping. And when she, looks around, she said she saw a great place with fish. She thought Dior was going to love it. He'd want to fish there. She goes back to get him, and she sees grandpa sitting there by himself and says, hey, where's Dior? He says, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, I sent him back to you. I yelled to you that he was coming. Where is he? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. He never came back. And so from the time that he, this little 2-year-old is running up the dirt trail back to their, their campground, as mom's watching him run back to the campground, sees him go far enough, feels like she's close enough to yell to grandpa, hey, he's coming. In the time that she turns her back, he goes missing, right? From that point to the campsite, which is supposed to be very close. I think they said it was like 15 feet away. So that's a very, very short time for something to happen, to the kid. But yeah, grandpa had early onset dementia. I also was reading because it's like the boots, right? Like the little kid had on boots that were way too big for his feet. So it's not like he was moving really fast. If somebody would have snatched him or an animal grabbed him or anything like that, the boots would have fallen off. They didn't fit the kid's feet. He just liked them. And so nobody heard any screams. Like you said, they call out dogs, they call out helicopters, they call out all this stuff. And they literally don't ever find any trace of him. Like they never did. There was no scent that they picked up. There was no clothing found anywhere. Around where I live, if somebody goes missing out in the woods, if it's a bear attack, or a wolf, you find pieces of the person and their clothing in the scat, later. Like you find something that says, this is what happened to this person. Or, if they go out there to commit suicide, or if they fall off a cliff, eventually you locate the body. But this 2-year-old kid just completely disappeared, like completely disappeared. And I even, looked at some of the skeptics, right? And out of all of these missing 411 cases, this is the one that there is no real, there's the whole maybe he fell into the river. Okay. Maybe he did, but they searched downriver and never found him, right? Maybe, grandpa's friend snatched him and did something with him. Again, maybe, but the thing is that in all the searching and all the interviewing and stuff, he never turned up. Like they never found the kid. They never found any trace of the kid, even still to this day. It's a completely unsolved mystery. And there's cops involved and there's interviews and there's, being taken into the police, station for questioning and all that kind of stuff. Nobody cracked. Nobody found a body. Nobody found any clothing. Nothing. So while you can try to explain it away and say, okay, yeah, maybe Mother Nature just got him, an animal got him, whatever, it still doesn't track, right? Because there are signs that point to those things. And this kid doesn't have any of those. There's nothing. My first initial thought, especially the first time I watched this documentary years ago, when I first heard about the missing 401 stuff, my first thought was, well, it's obviously grandpa's friend. That guy comes off as weird in the documentary. He gives me the creeps. And I'm still not 100% saying the guy didn't do it. But if he did do it, for a guy who seems somewhat intellectually slow, he did a really, really good job of leaving no trace. So, yeah. Unfortunately, this one has a very, very, very sad ending.
Yeah. So I didn't watch the documentary. I've been aware of some of these cases. But hearing what you're saying, my first reaction is, oh, they killed him. Like that's simple. But then where's the body? Right? Or they killed him, but there's no blood. If they would have ditched him in the river, they would have found him downstream. Like just listening to the negligence and the incompetence. I mean, leaving a man with dementia alone while you're going into town, that's elder abuse, right? So regardless of how you slice it, they're negligent, they're incompetent. That I'm not even going to I'm sending my 2-year-old, and I'm not even going to wait for a response from grandpa. I'm just going to holler that direction and take off. That is no. I've got 2 kids. There's no way, and I am walking that child to you, and I am going to get confirmation that you're watching this child, and it definitely wouldn't be 80-year-old senile grandpa. No way. This is The whole story is strange. At first, hearing this, I'm like, oh yeah, this slow guy who had previous charge. This is the fall guy. This is the patsy, right? This is who they're going to blame it on. But he doesn't have the wit to do this. He's just unsuspecting going on a fishing trip. So I thought grandpa. But then senile, dementia. Okay, that probably not, unless it's an act. I don't know. So then you're thinking mom and dad. But I don't know. It seems like it has all of the elements of a murder. They killed the kid, but none of the evidence. So that hits me as really strange. I don't like these people. I can tell you that. I don't like them. It's a tragedy what happened to them, but accidents happen when you don't mitigate damages, and it seems like there was no damage mitigation happening here. But yeah, the fact that he just disappeared, that's just weird. To me, it's just weird.
Yeah, and you know what? What's the weirdest thing? Well, at least to me in the whole story. So it wasn't even a river. It was not supposed to be that even deep. If it's a creek and it's not that far from the parents and Isaac, the great grandpa's friend. So if 3 of them were at the creek, and if you can yell back at the grandpa, her grandpa at the camp, how big of a distance that is, 100 to 100 yards. If the creek is here and the camp is here, and the boy walks back, there are no other people. They already passed the creek. Parents are at the creek. The boy is not in the creek. Where the boy can go, he cannot run that fast, that far. If the animal snatch him, which is not impossible, I think they would find skeleton or boots or some remains. And this is why someone said from either researchers or officers, it seems like as if he was snatched out in a thin air. And many of these cases that we'll be dealing with tonight, they seem to have that. Well, they have many similarities, but this seems to be one of those things. It's like it's so freaking mysterious that you can think it can be gazillion theories, yet all of those theories have serious flaws. And like the best answer is we're not sure. We don't know. If you want to be intellectually honest with yourself, it's like how can anyone disappear within 100 yards, 150, 200 yards, or even less? It was safe. No one was there. So for me, if the great grandpa was over there, old, he can't run that much and do something, and then parents come back. It's like in that low amount of time, no way. Isaac, the weird guy, was with the parents at the creek. He didn't do it either. So it's like, well, it can be. I'm trying to understand if we, like Sean occasionally likes to mention Occam's, was it Occam's razor? Yeah, that you like to mention.
Occam's razor.
Occam's razor, yeah. Usually that means that the simple solution to something is usually the one that is true. So if we would eliminate parents, if we will eliminate the grandpa and Isaac, their family friend, well, what is left? It's left an animal or an entity that doesn't belong in this, in this reality. It's in this dimension. And this is where many people going on, not just with this case, with many cases, people are getting suspicious. They're like, well, could the boy be snatched out in another world or in another dimension? And I know we have no evidence for that, but this is, myths, mysteries, and majesty. So we're covering everything. And this is what I'm not saying I'm leaning towards that theory, but even though the whole family and Isaac are seriously messed up people, like all of us, but they're even more messed up, there's not enough evidence that they kill him. And I also heard in another documentary that there's so many truckers out there who are like seriously psychopathic, and some of them are murderers. But like a truck driver coming in a camp in the woods, like how would he even come there? No. So it's like, it's like they would have seen people. That it's a small distance. It was still daytime. So for me, it seems like it was either an animal, even though that's not so easy to believe, but either an animal or maybe something supernatural. Ben, since you live close to Yosemite Park and you used to go there, Ashley has a question for you. She said, I'll repeat this. The National Park Service says that most of these missing persons cases happen in Yosemite. I would like your thoughts on that. I've been to Yosemite. What do you think on this question?
Okay. So just for a little disambiguation, we're actually close to Yellowstone, which is the one with the geyser, whoosh. Yosemite, I'm pretty sure, is one of the big ones over in California, I think. And I would say that's because it's California and bad things happen in California. So with any of the parks, one of the features that we see in a lot of these 411 missing cases is that they're almost always near water, and there's almost always some kind of a quick change or shift in weather patterns, either immediately preceding it or right after the person goes missing. Yosemite is an enormous park. If you've ever owned like a Mac or a Mac Pro or anything, a lot of their stock background pictures, come from Yosemite National Park. And it's huge, it's rugged, it's gorgeous, but there's lots of water, there's lots of extreme weather changes that can happen out there. And I mean, it's just chock full of disappearances and strange things that happen. Being, formerly from Texas and now currently living in Idaho, we don't have the best view of Californians. It's a beautiful state. It just is full of a lot of not beautiful people. And I think that it's also very, very, very possible when you get into places like that, especially ones that are really, really, really heavily trafficked, like Yosemite, that I believe there's absolutely serial killers living out there preying off of the people that come past them. 100% believe it. I'm also very close to Glacier National Park, which is absolutely stunning and gorgeous. It's, I think, about 4 hours away from me, where Yellowstone, I think, is about 8 hours away from me. And quite a few people have gone missing up in Glacier too. There's several missing 411 cases that have been covered out there. And yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I feel like the further north you get, the further remote you get, the more likely it is for somebody to honestly just disappear and never be seen or heard from again. Another interesting thing that I've seen is that if you take a lot of these missing 411 cases, especially the ones that are from back east, with like the Blue Ridge and the Appalachians and, a lot of these old school mountain ranges, you can overlay the missing 411 cases on a map over these old mountain ranges that are full of cave systems, and they overlap. And there's tons of these missing 411 cases that center around where all these cave systems are.
I've seen that picture. I've seen that years ago, and I remember. Yes.
Yeah. And nobody knows what's in those caves. Like the grand majority of them completely undiscovered. And so that opens it up to everything. It could be Bigfoot, could be aliens, could be secret government experiments. The last interview that I heard with Pallades, the guy that started the whole missing 411 thing, I think I was listening to him on maybe, Coast to Coast, or one of those shows. And he said after all these years that the main thing that he's leaning towards more than anything else, more than cryptids, more than aliens, more than, just Mother Nature took them, is government experiments. and that's where he was landing on it. Specifically, like governments trying to use secret military weapons to like open portals or to disintegrate people and stuff like that. So I know that gets out there, it gets deep pretty quick. But after researching it for as long as he has, I think last year, that's kind of where he was at with the whole thing. He thinks that's the closest, thing to it. Oh yeah, so that the Heaven family here pointed that out. Yes, Yosemite, lots and lots of what used to be illegal marijuana fields up there. Lots and lots of Bigfoot sightings too, but maybe there's a reason marijuana and Bigfoot get seen together a lot.
Okay, I have another short story. Well, I mean, the first one was longer, but this one is a short story of another missing child. So the first documentary deals only with children. So a very similar case to the young Dior in the previous story happened decades earlier in Colorado, in Rocky Mountain National Park. It was August 15, 1958, when a 10-year-old Bobby went missing also during his fishing trip. Bobby was following a camp counselor who, when turned behind, noticed that Bobby disappeared. On the 25th, the formal search was canceled after 9 days of effort. In the following year, 3 camp counselors returned, and they found Bobby's hearing aid, clothing, and biceps remains. The location of Bobby's remains was previously searched by the search team at least 3 times. And I just want to say that this last part of the story repeats in so many missing cases where the professional search teams go to a certain area. They say, we've been there like 10 times. Nothing. Year 2, 5 later, in the same spot where they sought, a body was found. In so many cases, many similar stories. Just like you, Ben, said, there's a change of weather. There's this. This is also another similarity with so many cases. So this is a whole story. Again, it's a very sad story from when, like 70 years ago almost, when 10-year-old Bobby disappeared. And in this case, they did find the body remains the following year. So that's all the data we got. It's not much. I don't know if you guys still want to say something, because it reminds of the previous case of the little boy Dior.
Yeah, I'll say something. So, it's interesting that they had searched this area at least 3 times, and then you have items that you obviously would have noticed prior. This is in August when this happened, so there wasn't snow on the ground. And I think it's early enough that you're not going to have a bunch of leaf litter. Like, if it was like October or November, you could say, okay, so I could see how something could be missing. And then after 3 years, decomposition. Okay. But, it's still technically summer. It's interesting. It's almost like this is something ritualistic, right? Like he's missing, and then they bring back the items and lay it out for all to see. So this was years ago. My wife and I, before we had kids, we were living in Tennessee, and we went up into I think it's Cherokee National Forest, but they were having this big thing. There was 5,000 people that were coming to this thing, and they were all up on Holston Mountain. So we go up there. These people, like, they're not like us. They live park to park. They create little crafts, sell them to the locals, and that's how they get money for gas to go to the next place. They set up little kitchens where they bring out all their utensils, and whoever throws money in gets to eat. You don't know who these people are. It's just crazy. 5,000 people in one place. And of course, there was tons of stories going around about people, do not pick up hitchhikers, because there's all these people in this area. And these are people who are purposely choosing to live off grid, but not off grid in a way that is like self-sustaining. It's off grid in like a parasitic way. Um, and it was just uncanny. The just the sheer number of people when you go up there. There's just people everywhere, and all kinds of illegal activity going on. Obviously, like I said, this was before we had kids. I mean, they they had an entire section of the forest that was completely set off and was tarped up, and this was for you know people who didn't know each other but wanted to get to know each other biblically. Um, and dude, there were kids living out there with their parents. Like, I mean, it wasn't just like adults. There were, I mean, tons of kids. And then as you're walking the trails, because we were walking the trails, just kind of sightseeing, they would inform each other when the cops were coming. Um, and then you would see people just scatter. It was, I mean, I didn't feel it at the time, but thinking back, that was scary, man. I would never do that again. And like I said, this is, you know, miles off of any main road, off of in a gravel entrance up into the mountain, and you're scaling this mountain to get up there. And that's just how these people live. So I can see how stuff like this would happen in national parks. Um, with Polides saying that he thinks that it's government experience. I mean, it's possible, and that might be the most probable explanation. One thing that I really think it's not recognized enough is feral humans. Like there are totally feral people that live in those places. I mean, we have instances where we found feral kids, and it's like, well, they didn't just come from nowhere. Um, I know that there was a case in Australia, and I think this was in the 80s or the 90s, where they had found two feral kids in different areas, and they had brought them together and were kind of trying to raise them up. It was kind of like as a humanitarian experience. So they were trying to benefit the kid, but also experiment, see if this is possible. Turned out that the kids were not picking up on English. They developed their own language and were talking to each other. In the set, like it's weird and freaky, and yeah, like it's so separated from human experience. So that's something that I really think about is, man, if you imagine the competence that God instilled in humanity for hiding, hunting, tracking, and then you take all of what makes you a human in civilized culture away, that's a dangerous animal, man. So yeah, that's one of my favorite theories on these things, is that there are feral humans out there that are hunting.
Yeah, I just want to say that things like this, while I was listening to you, remind me of the movies, something like Wrong Turn or Hills Have Eyes, or even something a little bit different, like with Nicolas Cage in The Wicker Man. There's so many weird people out there. There's so many savages. There's so many cults out there in the wilderness, remote areas, who God knows which spirits they're trying to appease. Who knows what type of sacrifices they're trying to bring. And I would dare to say, if this is happening, and I bet this happens in almost every country, but if this is happening in people who are involved in these cultish rituals, over time they get experience. So they're better in hiding their tracks, their footsteps, their any type of evidence. Um, I can also see that happening, but as we will be covering tonight, so many of these stories, so many national parks, and national parks are huge. Like, what are the chances that people with guns would be suddenly, and there's nothing remotely close to you in the vicinity of, let's say, 100, 200, 300 yards, but suddenly you're snatched out of almost like thin air and nothing is found. You don't even shoot, and you've been trained your whole life as a hunter to shoot. So we'll be also covering these stories. In that case, then I would think, that's just my ignorant, humble opinion, in that case, probably it's not a cult. But I would agree wholeheartedly with you, Sean. Again, we go back to those truck drivers, we go back to psychopaths, we go to sects and cults out there who have to do something horrible to please their cult leaders, to bring the blood as as the sacrifice to their deities and demons, you know, things like that. Like I said, they just remind me of these movies like The Wicker Man or those Savage movies where, like, yeah, it's still happening in the 21st century, but you can go and see people who are deformed, they interbreed, they can't talk, they look weird, they know nothing about electricity, internet, hygiene. They know nothing about nothing except how to survive, and many times they do things that we would think they're absolutely horrible, like even the cavemen wouldn't do things such as horrible and awful like they're doing, like in movies He'll Have Eyes and or The Wrong Turn. So I believe that these things absolutely happen. Third story: Jared Atedero, age 3, disappeared on October 2nd, 1999 in Comanche Peak Wilderness. In the fall of 1999, a Christian singles group was staying at the lodge, helping Aline, Jared's dad, to prepare for winter in exchange for lodging. He initially allowed his daughter to go with the group, but upon his son's insistence, he allowed him too. The group drove 15 miles further up to the road to the Big South Trailhead. When they came, the group went hiking on the terrain, and then started spreading into small groups. I had some typos in my text. One adult with Jared and his sister was ahead of the others. The little boy was running in front, playing, and his sister and the adult lost him from their sight. The group went back to the father, and he went on the road with them. The dad was yelling to God to help him find Jared. And we can see this in the story, right? Because the guy who was interviewing him, they went back to the same place, they're driving, and the dad was retelling the story of him praying in the car, please God, let me help find my boy. 65 search and rescue professionals were deployed to find the kid. They looked for 8 days, 24 hours a day, because they were doing in shifts and different groups of people. No evidence was found for 3.5 years. Then Rob Osborne and Garrett Watts, two gentlemen, hiked the Big South Train on June 4th, 2003, so 3.5 years later. Coincidentally, they went on a rock field on their way to the top. There, they saw a shoe in pristine condition. The height of that location makes it impossible for the 3-year-old boy to climb on a very rough, rocky terrain. The authorities found his jacket, pants, skull, and one tooth sitting atop of a log. There were canine alerts that were going that direction uphill. But the search team was searching there before, maybe even a dozen times, and did not find anything. One lady whose dogs were involved in the search and rescue team believes it was an animal that did this, while someone else thinks that it is beyond their understanding. Aline, the father, rejects this idea it was a mountain lion, since the boy's remaining of clothes that was found, his jacket, when tested, showed no lion's hair, zero DNA, zero hair, zero blood, nothing that would belong to any animal. Moreover, animal experts say that there would be an animal attack markings on the jacket, and it will be in shreds. The kids' shoes look like new, as if they were not used before. So they were just sitting there for over 3 years intact, which does not make absolutely any sense. Additionally, the animal wouldn't be dragging shoes and leaving them in pristine condition without any teeth or claw marks. Also, the kids' pants were found inside out. Mountain lions don't do that. And why would, it's like they're not doing the laundry. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be funny, but it's like, I know it's a sad story, but like, why would the animal do this? Why would they put the clothes inside out? Since 1915, there have only been 14 reported fatal mountain lion attacks in the US and Canada. So most likely it's not mountain lion. And there ends this very sad story that makes me think, well, again, it's always someone distancing from the group, and then that's where the incident happens, because you're safer in the group. That reminds me also of the demonic attacks. You're always safer in the church settings than if you isolate. You don't want to pray, you don't want to read, you don't want to go to church. You're like, oh, I'm enough for myself, I'm the church, I don't have to be in assembly with others. So this reminds me a little bit of that spiritual parallel. And I'm thinking, at least my humble opinion, if it's not an animal, for me, there are two options left. It's either some psycho or, again, a spiritual entity, because who in their thoughts, you have to be psychotic or a spiritual entity that doesn't think like us, who in their thoughts would just kidnap a child, kill him, but leave the clothes, especially shoes, intact? Like how twisted you have to be. That's not an animal. The animals don't kill from pleasure. And if they're devouring or like scratching something, they'll like put in shreds all or your jacket and clothes and shoes, everything. But yeah, this was intact. Only the body was hurt. So for me, it seems like this is more sinister. Could it be some psycho or a group of cultic people, or maybe a spiritual entity? Pastor Ben, what do you think?
So the more I keep, going down this rabbit hole of, fringe topics, the more I keep running into people that are talking about modern day, ritual satanic abuse. And not even, just like your run-of-the-mill Wiccans that are, dancing naked around bonfires and stuff, like actual Luciferian satanic groups that are doing things to people very intentionally in order to try and, facilitate demonic possession, or to try and break up, their personalities and split them into dissociative identity disorders, and different things like that, to try and corrupt God's imagers, right? 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, it's a bunch of hooey. I wouldn't have believed it at all. But following different avenues of thought, some, after cryptids, some after theology, some missing 411, some this, some whatever, all of them keep running into different people and they keep saying the same thing. Whether it's people who work with deprogramming, the victims of, this abuse, and trying to help them recover their minds and their hearts. Whether it's, people who have just seen some of these things happen, whether it's kids that have been born from the satanic abuse and then adopted out, into other families, and they start recounting the stories as memories are coming back to them of things that happened to them when they were young. I just keep seeing it come up more and more and more. And I am the last person to be like, oh yeah, that's just exactly what it is. Right. Because my whole life, even before I was saved, I didn't believe that anything like that actually existed. I knew that on an individual basis, there were bad people that did bad things. Okay. But the concept of an organized group that is intentionally working towards a goal by doing these, horrible, just absolutely horrific things to human beings, I would have scoffed at as a conspiracy theory. Well, my mind has changed on conspiracy theories in the last 5 years too, after all the COVID stuff. And so I'm seeing this, come up more and more and more and more. And I'm starting to come around to believe that yes, this is actually a thing that happens. It is a concerted effort on behalf of the enemy, the accuser, whatever, to come against God's people. And I think that a lot of it is through this ritualistic abuse. And I think it's absolutely terrible. I'm not saying that they have like a club, that they all get together in black robes or anything like that. But I'm saying it can be the crazy man living out in the woods, and it can be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And in some other country, it can be, a mother at home with her kids. And while they don't know each other, they're all actually working for the same puppet master who's pulling all their strings. I'm starting to come around to that idea. And so the concept or the idea that some people, when you narrow it down, if we get down to 10,000 or whatever we said the number was, that go missing and are never seen from again, then, that's 10,000 people that could very easily be abducted, be sacrificed, be used in rituals, whatever. God, and I just like cringe even hearing myself say that because I'm so anti-satanic panic. But it just keeps coming up over and over and over again. And so, yeah, I'm starting to think that there is absolutely something to that. And the fact that a lot of these missing 411 cases are kids, lends itself to that belief because it all starts with corrupting children. I know that, I think there's like 4 different missing 411 documentaries out now. I think the first one was kids, and I think maybe the second one was hunters, and so they've kind of, keyed in on different things, but so many of them are children. And I think that really does tie into a plan, that the evil one has to come against God's children.
Yeah, if anyone has any doubt on what Pastor Ben had just said there, simple exercise, Google search. I want you to look up Project Artichoke. Or if you have problems thinking that your government would do that, look up the backstory for the Manchurian Candidate. This was a known thing that happened in World War II, right? Project Paperclip. We bring all that data over. What they were doing is they were psychologically fracturing people so that they were able to control and instill this narrative into this person's fractured personality, have them go out and perform these duties and be completely unaware that they're doing it. So these were operatives that would be the perfect operative because you could torture them endlessly and they literally have no idea what they did because there's a trigger word trigger thing that just turns it on. For a really high profile case that we know about, for Tex Watson, it was LSD, right? And he was able to cut a baby out of a person, murder the mother, and kill the baby. And that was very high profile. That was part of the Charles Manson, not Marilyn Manson. Charles Manson. You're also not a good guy, but Charles Manson. Yeah. That was part of that whole thing. And when you look into what was going on with Charlie Manson, why he didn't go to jail, who his contacts were, how he was getting the drugs, how he was groomed in prison to do this, how he was groomed as a child, coming up in the juvenile detention system to operate this way, started a cult, brainwashed people, had an entire group of mostly women that were willing to kill for him. Bro, if you don't think your government is up to some shady stuff, you just haven't been paying attention. As far as satanic abuse, that's 100% legit. Now, yeah, satanic panic and all that stuff, people went overboard, started making up all kinds of crazy stuff. But that was what was over the top. There was something there. There was something happening, and it's still happening today. They just call it different things. It's not, we don't call them satanic cult groups anymore. We call them 3-letter agencies. And Yeah, don't come after me. But yeah, uh, that's what's happening. And if you just go into the FOIA database or the FBI vault, you can literally search this stuff up. They're not hiding it from you. You're just not looking for it. And if you were looking for it, you would be like, yes, instead of no, Pastor Ben's crazy and Sean's crazier. No, look it up. Look it up.
Yeah, as long as I'm not crazy or Amber, I'm okay if you two guys are crazy. Okay, let's cover two more shorter stories with kids and then we'll switch to the adults. There are 41 missing children missing in Oregon to the documentary date, which was 2016. So 41 missing kids until 9 years ago. One of them was Samuel Belkey, who was 8 years old when he was missing in Crater Lake National Park on October 6th, 2006. Samuel was visiting this place with his dad. He had some developmental problems, maybe some form of autism. While hiking, the kid went running off, another similar pattern, um, crossed the road, wanted to throw a rock at a cyclist, and when his dad yelled at him and told him not to do that, but to come back, the kid ran the opposite way and then disappeared. About 25 researchers, I mean, not researchers, 25 searchers and dogs came to find the boy. It was very cold below the freezing at that night. 2 feet of snow came in the next day. They also got a helicopter search, but since the weather was bad and it started raining after that, they had to land the helicopter after a while. The National Park Service turned down repeated requests to be interviewed, which is a little bit odd. Like, you're just helping the family find the boy. Why would you not be interviewed? Maybe you can, provide more information, but whatever. Until this point, they did not have an organized database of all the missing people throughout the national parks, which we said at the very beginning. It cost them only almost $1.5 million to do the whole database of missing people for the whole country, and they don't have $1.5 million in the budget. There are many theories of Samuel's missing, and one theory is that he got covered by the snow and a wild animal did the rest. Okay, so let's say I'm a father, and my child went to play, and I can still see him. Maybe he went 150 yards away, and he wanted to throw a rock out of fun to a cyclist. And I say, hey, you don't do that. That's not nice. Come back. And maybe the boy got upset and ran the opposite way. Okay, he's now running towards the forest, towards the wilderness. I'm his father. Cars are passing. I may wait until car two to pass, and I'm going that way. I'm running after my child. Maybe I'm not doing a full-blown Usain Bolt, right? I'm not running that fast, but you're trying to go get your boy. The boy disappears. Again, another mystery. It doesn't have to involve anything supernatural, paranormal, but it's weird. It's like, dude, whoever is coming and waiting to snatch all these people, it's like they cannot wait at every yard wherever people are dwelling, living, visiting, hiking, camping. Like, we don't have that many people living in these places, even if it's a cultist, trucker, psychopath, visitor, alcoholic person. Like, they're not living under every rock to steal someone. So it's like, again, that's that question. Like, okay, the boy was a little bit on the autistic side. Okay, that doesn't mean he was stupid or that he wouldn't be able to listen and obey his dad, but he just decided to disobey his dad and got upset probably when his dad scorned him, rebuked him loud publicly, and he got maybe ashamed and he went the other way. And that's where they stopped. Well, that was the last time where anyone saw him, and they did not find anything when it comes to him. And the search and rescue team refused to comment on this case. So again, the best theory out of so many theories is that maybe he got covered by the snow because they didn't find him, and that night it was snowing, and the animals did the rest, which is very plausible. Very plausible. But my question is, like, how did he disappear that soon? Like, he wasn't alone. His father was not that far. Reminds me a little bit of the first story we did with the little Dior and the creek. how can someone vanish? It's like almost like the earth opened, like in the story of the Old Testament. Where was it with Korah and rebellious group? It's like the earth opened and swallowed up, and the boy disappeared. Like seriously, how does this happen? I don't want to necessarily involve stories of portals and stuff like that. I don't even know if I believe in these things. But it's like, dude, sometimes the weirdest things seem to be most plausible. I'm sorry, but it's like this is not an isolated case. You can say, well, in a case like this, there was a serial killer who was tracking this particular child or woman or man, or like this was happening. So but like in all these stories, it's impossible that they're always behind every bush, behind every rock, behind every tree. So many crazy people. We don't have that many people. We need billions of people living just in America to be preying on everyone who is walking out there. So it's like, well, yeah, it's either animal or I'm afraid if it could be something more sinister, something more, supernatural, because an animal kills just to survive. It doesn't kill for pleasure, right? Or it can be also to be territorial. So, but spiritual entities, demonic entities, they're way more sinister for that. So if both the cultist and the sinister evil spiritual beings are doing this for the sake of blood, because life is in blood and it's holy and precious, God gave it, well, then they could be serving the same master. These are my thoughts. Okay, Ben, you want to briefly please comment on this so we can then switch to other stuff?
Yeah, no, I just agree with, a lot of what you said and some of the conclusions that we're coming to. It reminds me though, like, because we brought up Occam's razor, right? Usually the simplest explanation is the correct explanation. Well, on the flip side of that, you've got Sherlock Holmes, right? And he says when you've run down every plausible, option, the truth must be the implausible one. It's the thing that doesn't make sense. It's the thing that you think can't be true. And so when you said, okay, well, they must have fallen into the river or the lake. Okay, well, we dredged the lake and we walked the whole span of the river and there's no body. You say, okay, well, it must have been an animal. Okay, there's no animal tracks. There's no body parts left behind. There's no clothing. None of it makes sense. And you say, okay, well, maybe it was another person. Okay, great. Where was that person at? Where were they parked? How did they snatch the kid? Where did they take the kid? Where is the evidence? And there's nothing there. So it goes back to, okay, so Occam's razor said the easiest idea is, okay, the kid went into the wilderness, he ran away and he died. Okay, well, now you've got a parent who's actively chasing his son, his, albeit autistic son, right? And is running towards him. I'm going to say he's seeing him. He's watching his kid run into the woods out of eyesight. And by the time dad gets there, the kid's just gone. He's just gone. Like,
and the dogs, in all of these cases, the dogs can never smell the scent. Never.
Exactly. They can never find a scent, right? And so all of a sudden now, all of the normal things that you want to rationalize, when you put all the evidence together, the only thing that makes sense is that there's something else at work, right? No, I know that there's tons of serial killers. I forget how many it is, 200 something, I think, that are active in America at any given time, right? But you're correct. You can't have one hiding in every national park around every turn at any given moment, waiting to snatch a kid. And this kid went out onto the street to throw a rock at a cyclist. How's anybody going to know, to be in the woods across the street to snatch him with dad in pursuit, knowing that if I'm a human being, I don't care how big and strong and fast I am, I'm going to be leaving tracks. I'm going to be leaving DNA evidence behind. My shirt's probably going to get stuck on a twig and rip. Like something is going to happen and they're going to catch me if I snag this kid, right? So the only thing that's left, however implausible, has to be the truth. And that's where we start looking at the implausible ideas, whether we want to believe it, whether we want to go there or not. It's like, okay, is it a spirit? Is it spiritual? Is it physical but a cryptid? Is it physical but controlled by something else spiritual? Is it government? Is it whatever the case may be? And that's why we're going down these rabbit holes, because we realize we've run, all of the normal things to the ground, because none of those answer these cases. And it just flat doesn't make sense. How dad's in pursuit of his kid, loses sight of him as he runs into the woods. So he's running straight at the kid where the kid was, and the kid's just gone. There is no way to explain that in normal physical human means, at least not that I can think of.
I could see how that you have a combination of the spiritual and the government. I could totally see something like that happening. I just thought about this, but who has jurisdiction in a state park or a national park? The feds. Cops can't come in. That's federal ground. Can't bring in a sheriff. That's federal. So the people who refuse to comment are the people who are searching for him. Those are the people who have jurisdiction there. Only other people who come in is the FBI. And in some of these cases, the FBI is just turned away, right? So I don't know why the National Park Service would refuse to comment. I don't know why the Department of Education needs 5 billion rounds of ammunition. I don't know why the Department of Energy has a fighting force 1/5 the size of the National Guard. I don't know. I don't have those answers. What I do know is that something weird is going on. And once you get to that federal level, we have no right to know what's going on. According to them, we don't have any right to know. So stay out of the parks. Creepy stuff is happening.
Or go in groups, bring flashlights, bring guns, don't separate from each other, and come back before the sun starts going down. That doesn't guarantee success and that you'll live longer, but it increases the chances of you surviving. Okay, last story when it comes to kids, and it's a positive one. Super weird, super creepy, but a positive one. On April 10th, 1952, Keith Parkins, age 2, disappeared in town named Ritter in Oregon. His brothers went to the barn to see a new calf at lunchtime. The older boys came, but not Keith. The boy said that he went around the barn, but he wasn't there. A search team was formed, and it totaled around 200 people who were seeking through the night. They found his footprints 3 miles away. His body was found 5 miles from his footprints, meaning 8 miles away from his home. A 2-year-old boy, 8 miles from his home. His face was in the snow, his body stiffed, and his face was scratched pretty bad. He disappeared around 12 p.m., the lunchtime, and was found the next morning at 7 a.m. But how could a 2-year-old walk for 8 miles in the freezing temperature? His clothes were found ripped, and it was understood it was from the barbed wire fences around the ranch. Well, that's an assumption. What if it was something worse? When the father saw the kid and picked him up, he was alive. So he started getting frostbites. He was stiff, but he was still alive. He suffered frostbites but survived. Keith does not recall anything at all to this day, because in the documentary, the documentary crew, they go to his house. He's an older guy now, like in his, I don't know, 60s or whatever, and he's telling of this story, and he remembers how the people reacted and how that was a mystery. But when they asked him, do you remember anything, he said nothing. So to this day, he never figured out. But it was a mystery that ended up with a happy end. But I would say, praise be to God, because if they would be late for a few more hours, couple more hours, that boy wouldn't survive. So how can a 2-year-old boy, where would he even get the energy to go 8 miles away? His clothes and his face are all scratched. Can you say barbed wire? Okay. Yeah, but what happened from that point to 8 miles further for the kid's face to be scratched and his clothes? If it's an animal, the animal wouldn't be just playing like that because a 2-year-old boy doesn't represent any threat. If the animal is hungry, it will finish the business in a minute, less. So again, but then if it's a human being and it had sinister desires, usually men who are psychopaths, they also don't leave the things unfinished. So that's another mystery. Thank God it ended up happily, because they had 200 people searching, not 15 or 20 or 30. And they were like resilient. They did not stop. And they found him just before he died. It's another mystery, but thank God this time with happy ending. Pastor Ben, your thoughts?
That one actually reminds me of a case that we had, right here in my town, the last few months. Occasionally, kids get out and go missing, that kind of stuff, but usually they're found right away. We had a case where a girl, I think she was, I don't know, 9, 10, 11, 12, something like that. Her dog was out in the backyard barking. It took off after something out into the woods. Girl who, if I remember correctly, is on spectrum, had some autism or something, went out after dog. I'm going to go catch my dog, right? And she runs out into the woods chasing the dog. Her going and getting the dog is not unusual. That's what happens. Well, girl and dog don't come back. They just don't. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, mom gets worried. She's starting to, Facebook message, she's posting, neighbors, she's calling, is my daughter on your property? Have you guys seen her? She didn't come back with the dog. We went out and tried to follow her, couldn't find her. What the heck? An hour after she's missing, cops and the SAR, the search and rescue stuff's called in. Helicopters flying over our house. It's flying all over the mountains behind us. It's going everywhere, trying to find this girl. And again, ended happily. They found her hours and hours and hours later, miles. I think it was more than 8 miles away. She couldn't verbalize what happened, but they said they could tell that she had fallen into a lake or a pond at some point. It was snowing outside, so she's running through snow, right? Pretty sure she was barefoot. They said she was in her pajamas when she went running after the dog. They found her with the dog miles and miles and miles away from where her home was, on the complete other side of a different mountain, that on the property of actual friend of ours. She was found like on the backside of his property. No one's really sure how she got there. Another guy we know followed her tracks and followed and followed and followed them through the snow as it's snowing, and they're starting to get covered up. A big storm had just moved in, especially up in the mountains. And he recounts, he says, I was losing the tracks in the snow. They're disappearing right as I'm looking at them. And so he's doing his best to follow them. He falls into a pond and says that must have been the pond she fell in. He is now lost and doesn't think he's ever going to find his way back out. Up on the mountain, no cell phone reception. He was out there, this guy's out there tracking her by himself. There was hundreds of volunteers and the helicopter and everything, but he had been following what he thought were her tracks, which is away from where everybody else was searching. He falls into the water, manages to get out, has lost the tracks, has lost himself. He's got cold water shock. He's freezing. And he managed to just start yelling her name, and he heard something, and he walked over towards it, and he found them. And that's where they were. And then he was able to go from there to get, her to a safer area where he was then able to get signal and call for help. Again, she was fine. She was bruised up. She was freezing, kind of hypothermic. The dog, luckily, was a Great Pyrenees, which is an enormous 100-pound plus white, furry, warm dog. And she was snuggled up next to the dog. Who knows what the dog went off chasing into the woods in the first place, that she ran after it. But yeah, like, It had been long enough that most of us were expecting it to turn into a recovery mission from a search and a rescue mission at that point. But amazingly, she hadn't frozen to death. She was able to get out of the freezing water. She fell through the ice into the pond. She was able to pull herself out somehow, and was found with her dog keeping her warm as they were hiding up next to a tree, huddled together in the snow. Yeah.
What's crazy about that story, and then I'll comment on the story that that Nico provided. But what's crazy about that story is if you know anything about Great Pyrenees, they are shepherding dogs, and their job is to stay with their flock and bark and basically do a show of force, keep away predators, but they don't leave the flock. So the fact that it bolted and left its territory, left its, for lack of a better term, flock, which is its family, that is just totally not typical shepherd behavior. And the fact that she was with a dog, I mean, that's probably the safest place you could ever be, right? Because that dog is not going to let anything bad happen to you. As for this story, you know, stuff like this, that's just crazy how the child is in one place, and then, I mean, I understand it's a long time, what, 19 hours, but it's from this place to 8 miles away. There's no 2-year-old that's going to walk 8 miles. That ain't going to happen. You know, 8 miles is hard on anybody. You know, anyone who's been in the military knows after the first couple miles, it's rough, and it's hard going, and you just want to stop and sit down. There, I can't imagine a 2-year-old getting there by itself. So what moved it? What took the child there? And then how does the child not remember anything? That's weird. And, you know, I understand the frostbite, being face down in the snow, but what kept the child alive throughout the cold? And it didn't die of hypothermia, because being out exposed to the elements, there had to be something there that was, I don't want to say protecting, because it technically kidnapped the kid, but that was preserving it for some reason. To me, it's just that's just odd. It brings in a lot of questions.
Yeah, that was something else, you know, my brain squirreled and I forgot to mention the fact, Nico, when you were reading that story, you read something that was really kind of a key piece of evidence. When they found the kid was 5 miles away from his footprints. So that means for 5 miles, that kid left no footprints, no track, no trail. And yet they found him way the heck over there, 5 miles away from his footprints, which ended 3 miles away from where he went missing. So
as if it was flying, or someone literally took it and placed it somewhere else. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it was a portal.
Okay, I don't want to be just doing this by, you know, and stealing your guys' thunder and stories. Ben just said one story. Sean, do you have any story you would like to say? Or Pastor Ben can go and tell another story, or I can continue. It doesn't matter. Do you have any story that I didn't prepare for tonight that you think it's fascinating to share?
Me or Pastor Ben?
You, Sean. Because he already, yeah, Ben already said one story, so I would like, maybe you want to do your turn.
Well, so there is one story that I'm thinking of that has to do, it really ties in with this child. And I'm trying to remember the details of it, but essentially it was a person who was on the East Coast, and within like 2-hour period of time, he calls his family from the West Coast, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. I don't know where here is," but he was able to find out. He was like clear over in Los Angeles or something, and he lived in like Miami, and so 2 hours. That's not even the time that it takes for, I mean, an airplane takes longer to travel that far. Luckily, that was a case where the person didn't actually, you know, go missing. but it just kind of shows that how you can be in one place and you just disappear and now you're somewhere else. And, Pastor Ben, you had talked about, kind of jokingly portals, but I mean, I don't know how else you would explain that. Him going from one place to another, without having any recollection of it at all. Just he was here and now he's here. And to me, that is unexplainable. But yeah, that would be the one story that that I was thinking of as relating to this, from what I had found in my own research.
Okay, do you want to say any other story, or maybe Pastor Ben, you want to say the story, or I can start with the adult stories from hunters from the following documentary.
So yeah, the next story that I'm really super excited to talk about, if you don't cover, is an adult story. It's not a hunter, but we'll just head that direction, and I'll see if you end up mentioning it, and if not, then I'll circle back around to it.
Okay, sounds good. So now we're switching to the second documentary that came out 3 years later after the first one. It's called Missing 411, The Hunted. So David Polides, the guy who wrote these books and made this documentary, is a former police detective and author of Missing 411 book series. In the course of a decade, he investigated over 1,200 missing cases, talking about an expert. So he divided his documentary in several chapters. In chapter 1, we read of 3 or 4 very creepy and very interesting missing cases. This is the first case. Hunter Thomas Messick, age 82, went missing in Northeast New York on November 15th, 2015. Hunters are in general very skilled, experienced, and knowledgeable people. So when they disappear, it seems odd and serious. Thomas was a U.S. Army veteran and a long-life hunter and fisherman. He would often take his 3 sons to camp in nature and taught hunting classes to kids and adults. He's lost his right eye, and over time, his hearing was getting bad. His old friend witnessed that Thomas did not have problems with drink. He even taught some Bible classes. A group of 7 men, including Thomas and one of his sons, Rob, went hunting in Lily Pond. This was their first time hunting there. Out of 7, 4 hunters/watchers were in their 80s. Thomas was the furthest one from the lake. He was sitting there watching for deer. He carried a walkie-talkie, a rifle, and a camouflage clothes. His old friend witnessed hearing a weird noise in the woods that he never ever heard before. Something like snapping, something like a huge trap closing. The sound did not last long. It was about 150 yards up the hill. The hunt lasted 2 hours, but no one spotted any animal, which I have to say, I've never been hunting, but this is kind of weird because this place is supposed to have, tons of animals. At about 3 p.m., all the men gathered in their vehicles. They called Thomas, but he did not respond, even though they were all on the same station. They even fired shots in the air and when yelling for his name. The last light on this day was at 7:34 p.m. Out of 6 men, 3 went back to the camp while 3 stayed at the truck overnight, beeping the horn and firing more shots. A state police helicopter landed in a local town, and the formal search party of 13 men was organized the next day, November 16th. Many locals and firefighters also joined the party, so that on one particular day, the team had about 300 men. Steve-Sean Lamourie, I think that's how it's pronounced his last name, the undersheriff of this town, witnessed that the wildlife was completely gone when they went out to seek for Thomas, including chipmunks and squirrels. And I can tell you, we have tons of chipmunks and squirrels, even here in Chicago. So for them to disappear in the wilderness, that's creepy. It reminds me of the movie Predator. I don't know why, just reminds me of that movie. So the undersheriff said that that detail was very strange. They checked both the nature and the roads. After the third or fourth day, Thomas's family, lost hope of finding him. Divers searched Lily Pond and all streams and swamps within the search grid. Nothing was found. Candy wrapper, walkie-talkie, weapons, nothing. On the fourth day, two FBI agents arrived. There are two FBI reports from the 1960s describing missing persons cases that are quote unquote eerily similar to the Thomas Messick case. The formal search for Thomas ended on November 26th. Even after 3 years following his disappearance, search efforts found nothing. The FBI did not return calls to discuss their involvement or finding on Thomas's disappearance. So, Pastor Ben, we have a gentleman who was 82 years old, partially deaf, lost his right eye, but he was still sane. He would lead Bible classes. He would teach others how to hunt. He was a hunter his whole life. He didn't have problem with alcohol, as his friends and family witness. He was an elderly man, but still knew how to shoot, still knew, was cognitive, able to talk, to walk, all of these things. He was just getting older. Yet, when people who left him to be a watcher of the animal, especially deer, when they left him and they were seeking for animals for 2 hours, and when they came back, they didn't find him. Not just they didn't find him, again, same story, no footprints, no candy wrappers, no guns, no clothing, no backpacks, no phone, no walkie-talkie, absolutely nothing. If you want to kidnap someone, if you want to kill someone, you wouldn't necessarily care about these little details, especially if it's an animal. You wouldn't carry a rifle with you if you're an animal. If you're a man, sure, it's not impossible, but it kind of seems implausible. The jeep was there, but Thomas disappeared, and to this point, to this time, he was never found again. And because this was 2019, I don't think there are many chances that he stayed alive to this day. So another very creepy and eerie story. What are your thoughts on this?
So yeah, I just kind of pulled it up and was reading over to see if there was any new updates on it, if they ever found anything. And as of 2023, no, they still had never found anything. But this was, as of 2023, which, is probably at this point, year and a half, maybe a couple years old. Any requests to the FBI or to the police say it's still considered an ongoing investigation, because anytime you have a missing person, it stays considered an open case, even if it's a cold case. And so they won't release any other information on it. And yeah, he was an older guy. He was out with a group of young hunters. And it said that he sat down on a stump where he was going to sit and wait for them to come back from hunting. Said that he had on like a light jacket and a Snickers bar. And that was it, because he wasn't expected to be, out there for very long. And he just disappeared. That's it. He was in the Adirondacks. I've hiked in the Adirondacks before. My wife spent a couple summers working up in the Adirondacks, upper New York State. Beautiful area up there. But again, that's like all these other cases we've been talking about. It can get very rugged. It's super mountainous up there. Lots of caves in those areas. But yeah, again, it doesn't make any sense, especially now, because he went missing in 2015, I think, is what it was saying. And yeah, I mean, that's 10 years ago, depending on what month it is, and nothing, so even if my mind goes to the absolute worst place, especially with the adults, let's say he went out there to die. He was old, he was tired. He said, I'm just done with living and I'm going to go out there to die. Maybe he, hit a gun on him or something. And he went out there to commit suicide, and he intentionally was going to hide his body, where it would be hard to find, so none of the other young hunters would find him. The place where he was last seen is frequented by hikers, hunters, campers, fishermen. Like in 10 years, eventually somebody's going to find his body or his clothes. Something is going to appear. And so many people were searching for him after it happened. It's like people can track people. Like they can look at your prints. If you can track an animal, like a deer hunters can track deer and elk and stuff for miles and miles and miles. People can track people, and an 80-something-year-old man can't just get up and walk away and not leave evidence that he was there. Somebody's going to be able to find him with a dog and sniff him out, or like the ground in the Adirondacks, at least where I was really, really like loamy. Like it's not like sand or dirt. It's like you kind of push down on it, and it's lots of roots and pine needles and that kind of stuff. And so while you might not be leaving a real like shoe imprint in it, like you would obviously like walking next to a river or a sandy beach or something, like when you disturb the ground and it leaves traces. There's evidence of where you were and where you were going, which direction you were heading. It's just, it's another one that doesn't make sense. So many people, on this online forum thing I'm reading, are thinking he had a medical emergency or something like that. The place where he was, they do say, has caves and crevices. There's remnants of an old mine, mine shafts and stuff that are up there. They say maybe he went in one of those to die. But if you can think, hey, this stuff's there, then that means it's there, which means people looked for him there and they still haven't ever found him. Yeah, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, I don't see an 82-year-old man going super far. And so the fact that they set up this grid, they were searching the area for 3 or 4 days before the FBI agents arrived. Like, if you're covering the grid, there's no way he's going to get outside of that without somebody there to help him. And the fact that even after 3 years, they can't find anything. No, he just disappeared. Like, he's just not in that area. I mean, so I don't know where he went, but not there. I mean, and even if he was going to go into a cave or something, I mean, you got to imagine an 82-year-old man. He's not going to be somebody who's going like spelunking. He's not, crawling on his hands and knees trying to get, to a deep portion of the cave. He would probably be able to go where you would see him in the mouth of a cave. And I imagine anyone who's searching, they would say, there's a cave here. Let's check that. Right. And you would see him there in the mouth of the cave. I mean, he just disappeared, and no trace of anything, weapons, walkie-talkie, no candy wrappers, nothing. That's just strange.
Okay, short but very similar story to this case is the case of Fred Drum, age 68, who went missing on November 24th the same year. About the 10th day of Thomas's search, the Department of Conservation Rangers for the state of New York were pulled from that event and sent 14 miles south to help with this case. Almost in the same time, Fred lived on his rural farm with his wife, who went on Thanksgiving Day to attend the banquet. And upon her return in the afternoon, he simply wasn't there. His belongings and car were there, but he vanished. There were helicopters and dogs, but the outcome was the same as Thomas's. Both elderly people mysteriously disappeared without a trace and weren't found almost in the same area, almost in the same time. Still not the same age, but also both of them mysteriously, and none of them belongings, footprints, tracks, nothing was found years after that. I didn't know this gentleman, but I would exclude suicide to be so much. That would be more for people who are like suicide can be a reason of different reasons. I don't want to be overgeneralizing, but these people seem to be family people. working hard, having kids, grandkids, being somewhat successful, living long, enjoying nature. Like, why would they want to raise their own, raise the hand on themselves? Like, it's not impossible, but like that would be the last option for both of these gentlemen when it comes to me. It's like, I don't know, but for me, it's so creepy that both people were found disappearing in the same area in the same time, almost same time. It's so weird. It's like once when you Ben mentioned all these caves, I'm thinking, but what about if these people, hypothetically speaking, didn't go to caves? What if they were dragged to caves? And because so many caves are unexplored, what if they ended there? For what reasons and by whom? I don't know. Cults, psychopaths, rapists, animals, cryptids, name it. Like, there's no way we can know. And if so many caves are hidden, some maybe even, it's not open entrance, it's not clear. Some of them are low, like you have to be going God knows where, or maybe there's a lot of bushes or high grass that is covering the entrance. Many of them we don't even know that they exist, even though they've been there since the dawn of time. So God knows who have been living in those caves, from wild animals to savage people to strange visitors or people who just find their home there, or maybe for certain activities like you mentioned cults before. God knows what. But see that all that unexplored system of caves just in America, what about the whole world, but just in America, gives me creeps. And just like when you said, Ben, when you compare the map of the missing people and the cave system, they almost perfectly match. That absolutely gives me creeps. It's like, it's such a weird thing to be called coincidence. So I don't know if you guys have any theory on caves. If not, I can continue further. No?
Yeah. So caves, you know, we see all these things with like sinkholes opening up, and with a cave, you have a void space, right? That's underneath the ground. And so it's possible that you could just be walking and sink right into one of these, especially if it's, you're dealing with a bunch of underbrush and stuff. You could just fall and disappear and you wouldn't even notice, because it would just, you have all this living thing that's connected with roots, and it's this brushy area. And so unless you're walking in the same path, you wouldn't even notice that there's a hole there. That's a possibility. Another possibility, for this Fred person is, I mean, as I'm looking through this story, it's like, well, his car was left, right? His belongings were left, which I'm assuming, being as this is 2015, included his cell phone, because if he had a cell phone with him, well, you could just track the cell phone. Um, like there's no, even if he took off on foot, they would have found him. This is a 68-year-old man. He's not going far, farther than an 82-year-old man, but without a vehicle, he's not getting that far. Either somebody came and got him, or if he wanted to commit suicide by launching a rocket into a sun, like that's possible. But if he offed himself, like, you would find the body somewhere, right? They found no body. The dogs didn't pick up any scent. Um, you know, Jokingly, kind of, maybe he let the black-eyed children in, which is something that you never do. And he disappeared. I mean, a 68-year-old man, a family man, his wife is gone. Who knows? I mean, there's lots of cases of people reporting these black-eyed children, and none of them say that they ever let him in. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to read this statistics and comparison what is similar in all these missing cases. And some of this Pastor Ben mentioned maybe an hour and 30 minutes ago, but I have a whole list, so I'll just read them quickly. So the things that connect all of the missing 411 cases and the profile points are this: one, point of separation. When the person becomes isolated or alone, this is when something happens to them and they disappear. Two, time of disappearance, mid to late afternoon hours. Three, boulder fields, Victims are often found missing in the areas of granite or rock fields. 4, near water, very common. 5, weather event. This is what Ben was talking about. There seems to be a weather incident from dust storms to blizzards in close proximity to the time that the person disappears or when the search starts. This is weird. In one of the stories, when they started searching for some guy, a sudden blizzard came. It's like, dude, why didn't it start 5-10 minutes early? I'm not saying it's like there's some relations, but it's like, it seems almost like a spiritual warfare, like something is trying to fight you and your crew of people to find the missing person. Like, it's like, I wouldn't even go with government. I would just skip the government and go directly to the big boss of this, weather changes and abilities. Okay, so 5 was weather event. 6, disability or illness. Oftentimes, the victim is later found to have an obvious or very subliminal disability or illness, as if almost whoever is tracking these, victims is tracking first to, I want to say necessarily kill, but take people with some. We're all made in God's image, and regardless of our body that is decaying and fragile, we're still perfectly made in God's image. But it could be then in the case like the sci-fi movie Predator, or like in a case of a serial killer, or maybe a hungry predator animal. What if it's preying intentionally on people who are injured or with disabilities to take them out? Because first, they're easier to be killed. Second thing, in someone's mind, they can be like, well, if it's survival of the fittest, maybe this person doesn't have to live any longer. They already live. Let's live this this town or this area, this planet for someone younger. In the case of people who are brainwashed, I wouldn't be surprised if they can think this way. But it's like usually people with disabilities or illnesses would be tracked down. 7, canines can't track. This is an extremely common profile point. In 95% of all the cases, dogs cannot track the scent of these missing people. 8, found in area previously searched. Even searched dozens of times, where the professional search and rescue teams are searching and cannot find, sometimes months or years later, a body of the dead person is found in that area. Someone killed it and dragged it to this point to think, oh, this is where the murder happened. Oh, it's natural, the animals killed it. But no, it wasn't there. 9, missing clothing. Clothes and shoes are removed from the corpses. 10, unknown cause of death. If the victim is found, medical experts usually cannot determine the cause of their death. And 11, common thing among all these missing cases is geographical clustering. There can be anywhere from 3 to 70 to 80 people in each geographical cluster. Okay, I want to read a couple more cases to save on time because we're almost 2 hours. So let me move to the second part of this, the second documentary, which is called Chapter 2, the Santa Fe Cluster. It has 1.6 million acres and we'll be covering a few main disappearances. Number 1, lady. For the first time tonight, lady. Audrey Kaplan, age 75, disappeared on July 30th, 2014. She was with her husband and decided to come to the ski resort. They hiked up the trail in the wilderness area and eventually split up. Audrey was in extremely good shape for an older person, but could not be found, so they started searching for her after she split up with her husband. Days later, one searcher, way off the primary grid area, came upon a very unusual sight. He saw a destroyed camping area and a woman in the fetal position several inches from the creek, deceased, completely naked. No shoes, no clothing, nothing. Her body was found on August 4th. It means on the 5th day of the search. A medical expert determined that even though, quote unquote, there are no specific autopsy findings to indicate hypothermia, the circumstances of Mrs. Kaplan's death and lack of fatal disease at autopsy support cold exposure due to the very low temperature at night. There were no injuries that caused or contribute to death. Given that there is no report of the descendant's face being in the water when found, nor circumstances documented to support that it had been in the water, it is unlikely that drowning played a role. This is from the medical expert, a lengthy quotation. So the person wasn't drowned, or at least it's not mentioned in the medical record, yet it had all the symptoms of hypothermia. However, and this is the last sentence of this case, the crime scene photos clearly show Audrey was completely in that creek. So it's another mystery. How did she end up there? Why was she naked? How come the photos in the medical record don't match? Very weird, very odd. I would exclude against suicide. I would say that's the listing. How did this lady end up here? Who took her clothes off? How come she seems to be almost drowning or dying from hypothermia, even though according to the medical expert her face did not even touch water? Yes, she had these showings in her lab work and in the medical case. It seems contradictory and not as if we're not given all the details. It's a sad story. My mom is 75, so this lady was the same age when she disappeared almost 11 years ago. Such a weird story. And she was found in a fetal position. And we know usually when a person is cold or scared, they get in that position like children. So it's like, who did this to her or what? That's the question, $1 million question. Pastor Ben, and then we can do 2 more stories for when it comes to adults, and we'll call it tonight.
Yeah, kind of like you had just said about your mom, Nico. My mom turns 75 this year as well. And so when I take that and imagine that being her, it really kind of hits home. Man, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's one of those things where, thinking rationally, I want to say, okay, well, at that age, maybe she was having dementia, maybe, her brain quit working and she just took off all her clothes. But then why would she decide to lay down and try to freeze to death next to a river? Which would be like the absolute coldest, worst place to lay down. Yeah, I appreciate that at least they found her. So for any family and friends, there's closure. But at the same time, that doesn't make sense. And the fact that, like the coroner's report or autopsy report or whatever doesn't line up even with photos that were taken at the scene, it's like, okay, so that adds a twist to it. Who is trying to cover it up? And what are they trying to cover up? Is it just a medical examiner who's trying to save, family members some heartache of knowing the gruesome details? That's what I would want to try and believe. But then again, that would be completely unethical and unprofessional. So no, I don't think that they really do that. I think that there is something there that possibly in a small town, local community, something like that, maybe somebody knew what happened to her and they didn't want it getting out. And so some things were staged or moved around to hide some key details. At least that's where my brain goes.
So I got 2 things. First of all, she was found way off the primary grid area, right? Which means that she wasn't within walking distance, what you would consider to be walking distance of a 75-year-old woman from where she was last seen. Secondly, there was no evidence that she had drowned, even though, according to this, crime scene photos clearly show she was completely in the creek, right? At first it says several inches from the creek, but then it says crime scene photos say she was completely in the creek. If there's no evidence of drowning, that means that she was dead before she was in the creek, which means that she was placed there. So she's out of walking distance and she's placed in a creek and she now has no clothes on. So this is a cover up for a murder or something. And that would be if I was thinking that this was human, but I don't necessarily go that route. I mean, this is, off of a wilderness trail, right? So it's not like there's a whole bunch of people that are out there. And I don't, I'm going to be delicate with this. She's a 75. If she was 25 and she was found dead and naked, I could maybe 75. Like, I know there's sick people out there, but really, um, so that's what I got to say about that. The second thing, as you were telling the story, there were a few things that were clicking in my mind about what we had discussed, or what you had discussed were the main things that correspond to all of these cases. One was that the disappearances happened between mid to late afternoon. The other is that they happen to form in clusters. It happens when there's a storm moving in, either a dust storm, blizzard. I'm assuming thunderstorm would be included. It happens near the water, and typically near granite or boulder fields. It seems like all of these things are coalescing in a transitional space where day is transitioning to night, calm is transitioning to storm, land is transitioning to water, and then all of these people are disappearing in these clustered geographic areas. I can't help but look at that and say, man, there's got to be something going on where there's these transitions that are happening. Maybe if everything is just right, you could get a portal, right? You have all of these transitional things occurring at the same time. You can only get so many layers of transition before everything transitions, right? I mean, if portals are a thing, they have to be happening somewhere, and at some point. And I can only imagine that at the coalescing of all these different transitions, you have space changing. Um, uh, I think that that's an interesting thought that I haven't heard that before, and not necessarily that it said it, just me looking at it, drawing that from the data. That sounds like an interesting possibility.
Okay, thank you. Two more stories and we're done. Melvin Nadell, age 61, you can't say he was really old, disappeared on September 6th, 2009. After driving for about 2 hours, Melvin arrived at Elk Mountain at 4 p.m. He joined two workplace friends who already set up a camp. This area is rich with wildlife, including bears and mountain lions. Mel had a slight knee injury, meaning if he saw a prey, he wouldn't be able to walk a great distance. He separated from his friends when hunting. He had done these things before when he camped and hunted overnight with others. Melvin's friends went up the mountain, and when they came back, the jeep was there, but not Melvin, who was supposed to wait for them there. They shot in the air and yelled his name. They called for the search and rescue, who came with a team and dogs. If Melvin wandered, his track and scent would pass the point where he was at, but they weren't. Melvin was carrying a firearm and a bow, but they were gone. They found none of these items. Everybody said that was odd. The New Mexico State Police oversaw the search, which included dozens of ground searchers, 2 helicopters, and multiple dog teams. The formal search lasted 6 days. Continued efforts in the years following have revealed no new clues to Melvin's fate. It's New Mexico, it's Roswell, so could it be the alien abduction as someone may think? Experts assume he had to be somehow picked up to be missing in this way. He couldn't march for a long time. That's the end of this, and yet another sad and mysterious story. Another person seemed to be snapped up in the air, snatched up, disappeared without traces. Dogs cannot feel the scent. Another person, I can't say elderly, 61, but he was getting there with bad knee, couldn't run for far, couldn't walk for far. And like with the case with the 82-year-old Thomas, who's our first story, when we switch to the second documentary and talking about hunters, he was left to be there at the camp, yet he is gone. Nothing was ever found. He wasn't physically able to jog or run or walk for a long time. He wasn't yelling for help. He wasn't shooting in the air if he was surrounded or feeling threat. He was a skilled hunter, just like all the previous stories, except that lady. Nothing. It feels like as if you would leave someone like me who is completely clueless what to do in the wilderness, then you wouldn't be surprised if I had gone missing. You're talking about people who spend their whole life out there in nature, and they know, especially if they've been to places like the same place for many times. So they know, they have these basic instincts of survival that we who live in cities don't have. Again, another sad and mysterious story. Dogs cannot feel anything, no traces, as if the person was snatched or snapped in the air and boom, gone, disappeared forever. It, I don't know. Is my mind going crazy, Pastor Ben, or like all these stories seem copy paste? Yeah, they're different national parks, different states, different people. Very deja vu, very copy paste stories. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, that one, being in New Mexico, sure, you got Roswell, but, you also got skinwalkers. um, that was the thing, that you mentioned that I really wanted to key in on, right? Okay. So one, yeah, we're talking about hunters. These are people who are skilled in knowing how to live and survive and get along outdoors. They also know how to shoot or even bow and arrow. This guy was left with a gun and a bow and presumably arrows. So if an animal or a human were coming to attack him, I'm sure he would have heard it coming, because hunters are trained to listen, right? Or to smell, to see. And so he would have fought anything that was coming to take him away against his will, right? He would have shot it. He would have shot at it with the bow and arrow. He would have hit it with the bow. He would have done whatever he could have to fight this thing. But there's no evidence of a struggle. The weapons aren't strewn around. Nobody hears gunshots or anything. The guy just disappeared. And you know what? Like, people don't just disappear. It just doesn't happen. Just like we don't see random spontaneous events, of creatio ex nihilo, things don't just pop into existence out of nowhere. Things can't just cease to exist out of nowhere. The matter and the energy that makes this human being has to go somewhere. Where did it go? Yeah, I mean, again, it's like they get picked up. That would explain why dogs can't track them by scent, because there is no scent on the ground to follow. That's why there's no footprints. That's why there's no evidence left around. It's about the only thing that really seems to make sense is somehow they're picked up. Either they're picked up or they take like one step in whatever given direction and they're teleported. Something happens to them. I would love to find out what it is. I don't necessarily want it to happen to me, especially if it's something bad, but I would love to know where they go. Where are they? What happened to them? Who knows? Maybe it's not recorded in any of these people's stories, but they were really, really godly and they're hanging out in heaven with Enoch and God just took them up. I doubt that, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, then he took his gun and his bow with him. These guys, like you said, they're hunters, they're outdoorsmen. These are people who they were skilled at being out where they were. They were skilled at adapting to their environment. They were skilled at reading their environment. They also knew the conduct, and they were out with other people. These people probably knew, but if nobody else knows, if you're out with a gun, the international distress signal is 3 shots in rapid succession, right? If you're in trouble and someone hears that, they're coming, because that is the international distress signal. Everybody, no matter where you're from, that's a call for help. He didn't do that. They didn't hear anything. So even if he was afraid to shoot the thing, he would have at least called for help. There, no sign of a struggle, no blood, no rip, nothing. He was just taken. I mean, there. If we can say nothing else, we can say he was taken. We don't know where he was taken, by what he was taken, but he was taken, because he's not there anymore. So, yeah, this definitely is just, it's weird. It's weird that they just disappear, and I don't know what would have caused it, but
Yeah, this is what caused it. I mean, seriously, the last few stories I've been listening, I'm like, who else or what else can camouflage, seem invisible, take you in a second? I mean, yeah, you predator will leave tons of blood, but don't tell me he wouldn't be able to take you without, like, he can just leave you unconscious, take it with you, and for whatever reasons. But this dude is able to do it. Camouflage dogs wouldn't be able to feel his sense. So it's like, that's what I'm listening. That's why I've been imagining when I listen to you guys and read these stories. Like, who else but this guy can do these things? If it's not him, it's some weird species out there that may resemble him. It's like, I'm just thinking of Predator this whole time. I don't know why. And Sean, if you remember, maybe a year ago we covered some in our creepy segments, eerie encounter segment stories. We covered a few stories that people swear that was like a creature in the woods, on the forest, like able to jump, to camouflage, and they will feel this presence, like something is watching them that will be out of this world. And they swear like they will sometimes see something changing, like shaping reality, as if like there's a cloak and a being that by its own will can present itself to be visible versus invisible. I'm like, dude, get that. That's what's called Predator, not just in the movie, but in those stories that we were covering. And now I'm listening. I'm like, well, I'm not saying it's like the Predator from the movies, but I'm thinking if it's not a cult or sect, if it's not some psycho killer, serial killer, if it's not an animal, if it's not savage people out there who can be living in caves or underground or whatever. It's like, dude, like we're talking about some advanced technology of creatures or beings that can just go through portals, snipe you out from the air, leave no traces, leave no scent, nothing. That's why I'm thinking about the Predator. I don't know why, but that's where my mind is going. I don't know if it makes sense to you guys.
there's only one problem with your theory. All right, some of these happened in California, and they have the governor, right? So there's no way the Predator can beat Arnold.
That's a good theory. It's a good theory. I have one more story and we'll be done unless you guys want to tell your stories or mention something that you forgot. The last story for tonight comes from a 54-year-old man called Stanley Vigil, who disappeared on November 7th, 2017. He was another hunter who went missing. He came to the area just 10 miles from where Melvin, the guy from the previous story, disappeared. He was in a car with his father and a friend. Suddenly, a deer crossed in front of them, so Stanley jumped out the car with his rifle, chasing the deer. And as that happened, this is so creepy. Fog and heavy rain simultaneously hit the area where he disappeared. So it didn't happen 2 minutes earlier. It happened when Stanley went out chasing the deer. He apparently wandered off. It was a 7-day search. Surprise, surprise, dogs couldn't pick up his scent. Professional trackers and helicopters couldn't find any tracks. 5 months later, an off-duty New Mexico State police officer and his son were fishing on a nearby river where they found a body 9 miles from his point of separation. It's another recurring phenomenon that reminds us of the previous cases. Well, in this case, at least the body was found. The family was able to bury him but there was no explanation how did he ended up there. Could he be like you guys were telling about the lady, or some other cases like when Ben mentioned the case in his neighborhood where a kid was, fell down the pond, survived with the dog? Could it be that this person, this hunter, somehow his legs slipped, it started raining, it became slippery, he fell down the river, he drowned, and the river took him 9 miles away? This seems plausible. We don't know, but still, regardless, how come the fog and the rain come the same minute and when he goes running after the deer? As if almost the deer was sent by as a decoy or something. I'm not going into some conspiracy theories, but it's like too many coincidences in many stories, like too many weird things just to brush them off. And also, again, why the dogs couldn't, let's say his body disappeared in the river. Yeah, it's well known, dogs cannot trace once when, a man goes into a river, then they lose the scent. But before entering the river, what happened to his scent? Like, it's like, it's like, it's not like there was a car in the road and immediately river, so he fell there. He was running to a certain point because he disappeared. It wasn't like the river was a step away from the car. So weird story, unfortunately, with sad ending. And I think I'm not trying to be pessimist or negative, but dude, most of these cases have been unresolved for 10, 15, 20 years. I hope any of these kids or elderly people are alive, but I honestly doubt. And I think they're always, in all these cases, I cannot say it's only one cause of death. I think it's different. It can be animal, it can be people, it can be unfortunate events and accidents, including nature. But I also think it could be something more sinister, like spiritual entities. So a case that happened only several to 10 miles from the previous story, which reminds me of the stories that we did like 30, 40 minutes ago, where two people disappeared also within, was it 10 or 40 miles? No, 40, yeah, 40 miles, when a guy disappeared south from the previous guy, almost in the same time. Bizarre coincidences or not, I don't know. I don't dare to give concluding thoughts as if I know. And I would say, like, many of these cases, if we will know more details, we can see, oh, it's actually not that weird or supernatural, but we don't have data. So maybe, Pastor Ben, you can have your both concluding thoughts and thoughts when it comes to this story, and then Sean can do the same. And you can take any time and add any cross-reference, any rabbit trail, any story you would like to mention if you want to, both of you.
So yeah, again, just another sad ending. Yeah, it's like you said, it's plausible. Maybe it was just the random circumstances of the events that as he's chasing the deer, the storm moved in and, the rain washed away his scent and the river rose and he got caught up in it and it washed him downstream and killed him. It's plausible. You're jumping through a lot of maybes, but it's plausible. I'll tell you a quick story because I don't want to take up too much time. This is to me the most interesting missing 411 story. Again, it happened in Idaho, an area south of here. I forget how many hours it is, but it's a few hours away from me. And again, in a wilderness area. This happened in 2018. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit real quick. On October 5th, 2018, a man named, I want to get his name right, Terrence Woods, I think his middle name's pronounced Shamel. Anyway, Terrence Woods, who was then in 2018 was 26, was part of a 12-member crew that ventured into the forest in Idaho County for a day-long shoot for a TV project. Okay, so it's a 12-man crew shooting for a TV show. The TV show was covering missing 411 stories. Right? 11 crew members ended up returning to their motel later that evening. Terrence, who was hired as a production assistant, did not. He hasn't been seen ever since. So we're looking at 7 years now. The case has baffled investigators and compelled Terrence's dad to consider a provocative theory about what happened to him. There's a whole Dateline episode on him. Pallades covers it in the Missing 411 episode as well. So to summarize the story, 12 young adults go to film for this reality kind of TV documentary series thing. They're looking into disappearances and all this kind of stuff, and for some reason, I think they were close to wrapping up for the day. For some reason, they said Terrence, who had been with them, they'd been out there for a couple of days, not camping or anything, but driving out to where they were. For whatever reason, Terrence literally just starts running. Runs past all 11 of them into the woods directly in front of them and disappears right as he enters the woods. Just disappears. They chased him. They took off after him. No sign of him. I've got the official report. If anybody's ever looking for a missing person, and it's been reported, you can actually go to namus.gov, namus.gov, and that's for anywhere, but it's the U.S. Missing People's database. Terrence Shamel Woods, 26 years old. He'd be 33 now. Closest location is Grangeville. I actually work with a gal who grew up in Grangeville. It says at about 5:30 p.m., while the crew was packing up and ending production for the day, Terrence was reported to have abruptly left the group and ran into the forest. Terrence was seen running by the film crew, who remained in the area searching for him. An extensive air and ground search by the Idaho County Sheriff's Office never found any sign of Terrence. That's the official police report for him. 11 other people. He runs past them into the woods. They chase after him, and there's no signs of him. They call the cops. The cops call in search and rescue. They move into the area within hours of him going missing. There's no sign of him. Nobody ever finds the guy. Ever. They literally watched him run into the woods and watched him disappear in front of their eyes as he breaks into the tree line. On the other side of this forest area, on the same day, at the exact same time, is another group of hikers, and one of their guys goes missing. On the exact same day, at the exact same time. Two different sets of people, miles and miles and miles and miles apart, both lose a party member under almost identical circumstances and were never seen or heard from again. That's insane. But it's not like, they disappeared. No, they weren't in sight for a while. Where did the body, where did they go? They were surrounded by other people watching them disappear with no trace. Pow. Like that's mind-blowing to me. That is the most provocative, story that I know of in the recent past. 2018, October 5th, 2018, went missing at 5:30 p.m. Like, you can go to the exact place where he was when he ran past the film crew into the woods. Just gone. 100% just gone. That blows my mind. If you don't believe any of the rest of them, if you can explain away due to natural causes, events, suicide, murders, anything else that you want to explain away, okay, all the rest of them, but not this one. Because he was surrounded by 11 other people from all different walks of life, all different parts of the world, coming together as a film crew for this show. literally were right there as he disappeared, and literally gave chase to him as he ran into the woods and couldn't find him. That's my favorite story.
Okay, I just want to say something before Sean goes. Could it be that in some twisted game of foul play, demonic play, a demonic entity would pick one person from every crew, team? I don't know why not two or three. Why just one? Is it an experiment? Is it some sort of Hunger Games in demonic realm or something we can only speculate? I'm just going wild, right? No one knows. But like, you came on my territory, I'm paraphrasing as if I'm the demon. You came on my territory to investigate me. Well, I'm going to give you hallucinations and thoughts that are not your thoughts. I'm going to play with you as a victim. And if you don't belong to God, and they can sniff or tell if you serve Christ or not, I'm going to give you illusions, especially if some of people and a lot of guys tend to smoke weed, some of them maybe more. And if they're especially under some influence, their minds and thoughts can be easily manipulated. So with that thing, and especially if you get up one of those hitchhiking effect thing that may be attached to you, it can be a combo of different things where you're being targeted from the whole team. Doesn't matter if it's 5 of you, 1,000 of you, you one are being targeted. And it doesn't happen just in a second. Maybe it's been playing with you for hours or for days, preying on you, brainwashing you, that entity. And now when it finally gets you to snap, you do what you do and you disappear. So it seems to me almost like a spiritual warfare and something more deeper, actually. It's like a combo of spiritual, mental, and emotional layer. This foul play of deprogramming and brainwashing someone to become who they are not, and maybe to think or see what they think it is, but it's not, and just run in the wilderness and never to be found. Even though I bet in both of these groups of friends, for both of these missing people, would say that's not how we know them. They were like, okay, relatively normal people, but like they would not do this and disappear and die over there by themselves in wilderness. Again, these were young men. So for me, I'm thinking out, well, could it be you're being targeted by a demonic entity who's preying on you for days and hours, learning you, applying different strategies, like Joshua Davidson and I did a few episodes on the Screw Tape Letters, how demons portray different strategies and tactics on us, on different strategies on different people, because we're all different. And it finally got to the point where the guy snapped and left. And who knows what happened to him, but nothing good happened to him if he was a victim or a sacrifice to these beings. Sean, sorry for taking your I just wanted to say this until I forget or whatever.
Yeah. So Ben, that is a crazy story, and if I remember it, I think I saw the Dateline thing where they were interviewing the people who were present, and they said that the guy ran impossibly fast, that there was no catching him, that they were trying, and he was gone. And it makes me think of something that I really didn't think of when preparing for this episode. The One of the first uses of the word Wendigo in English is not a creature. It is like a spirit of wanderlust. They call it it's called the call of the void, and it is just having to go, like to get out. And the fact that there was two people on opposite sides of the forest at this time when this happened at the same time, both walked into the woods and disappeared. Dude, I don't know what else to call that. And especially this guy, because the story in early American, it's one of the early American tales, talks about a native, like a Native American who gets, like, his feet are on fire and they're burning, and so the witch doctor is trying to help him out, but his feet are burning, and he keeps reciting this thing. I can't remember it's like a little poetic thing, but eventually he just takes off and runs into the forest, and that it's like a contagion where whoever you're around, it affects them and they have to go. And thinking about this guy, they're closing up shop, getting everything done, and he just turns to the woods and darts. Like, that just makes me think of the Wendigo, like the original use of the word in English, the Wendigo, the call of the void. You know, man, that is scary, creepy, and the fact that there's attestation to it hundreds of years ago that has nothing to do with the usage of the word now just makes it creepier. Like, this was, you know, when we use something, it morphs over time, but the original, when this was originally communicated from the Native Americans to the people, that's probably what they were thinking about, is people just disappear. Like, they're just gone. They have this urge to just go, and then they're just gone. Um, Also, I'm thinking of the fact that he hits the tree line, and he just disappears into the trees. It makes me think of a portal. Like, I mean, I know I've said portal a lot, but what else do you call that? Somebody, he hits this again, a transitional space between where they're filming and the wood line. He hits that and he's gone. Yeah, I think there's something to that, and the fact that it happened on two different sides of this forest with people who are not in communication with one another. I mean, that just makes sense to me. It just makes sense that a portal opened up, and they were, for whatever reason, called to it. Maybe not even consciously, just subconsciously. They walked into the woods and they're gone. And I mean, how many people? So 90% of the 600,000 people every year are found. All right, so 10% of the 600,000 number is what, 60,000 people are never found. I mean, I'm just saying, I would not be going to a national park. Uh, ain't no way. And it seems like even if you go with a group of people, you could just walk off into the woods and be gone. So I will not be going to any of those. Thank you.
Sean, when you said call of the void or call of the deep, my mind immediately went to two things. First, Cthulhu, myth, and then in the book, in First Enoch, we know that the Watchers, a group of Watchers, is imprisoned in the deep, in the abyss, waiting for judgment. And even Enoch, who they thought it could be their mediator, pleading with God to show mercy, he couldn't do anything, of course, because it's God's justice waiting for them in Tartarus. So when you mention the abyss or the void or the deep, whatever we want to use synonyms, I was thinking about Cthulhu and I was thinking about Watchers. I mean, where else can the call, if it's coming, call? It's not necessarily an audio call. Calling, like urge in your mind or in your soul to do something crazy, when you're going mad, when you're being possessed, or when you're being tricked in your mind to see something where it's not. So that call, where it's coming underground, it's not coming from the Father of Lights. It's not coming from the Father of Lord of Spirits. It's not coming from your Savior. It's coming from the underground, the underground god or demon. You can call it whatever word you want to call him. So that made me think, like, ooh, I'm not saying I believe in Cthulhu, but it's the same principle. It's the same nefarious entity, evil that despise people. So what happens to these people? I'm even more intrigued with just not like how do they disappear or who kidnaps them, who takes them, who kills them. Like, but what happens if not everyone is killed? Again, do they have some sort of perverted Hunger Games, or like in the movie Maze that came out, Maze trilogy? Is there something moving? They're supposed to escape, or could it be something like in the movie Cube, which I loved when I was a teenager? They're trying to escape, or like, is it simply some alien experiment, or they're like simply maybe sex toys to these whatever entities, or it could be a sort of alien cult or a cult of a certain god or goddess. I mean, there are endless possibilities. I'm just thinking that, it could be more nefarious than we're thinking. I don't know. Any concluding thoughts from both of you?
Well, as somebody who likes to go out in the woods a lot, I would say don't show fear. As imagers of God, as born again children of the Most High King, we take dominion where we go when we carry Christ with us. That's not to say bad things can't happen to us, but I do believe that if we operate out of fear, then the enemy wins. So I would say, you want to go camping, go camping. You want to go out into the woods, go out into the woods. Be smart, take precautions, and just understand that there can be more things out there working against you than bears and wolves and hunger and cold. I read a quote today that says, when we enter the wilderness, we re-enter the food chain. And so I think that's spiritually and physically something that we have to consider and just keep in mind as we go out into some of the untamed wild places.
Well, biblically, the wilderness is never associated with anything good. It is a place where, as Pastor Ben said, you are part of the food chain. What's on the menu? It's you. And it's kind of like, you get this humility when you look at when you look at like national parks and you look at where the trails are, and you realize that 99% of this is just open space with no trails. It's kind of like when you look at a map of the ocean and what the shipping routes are, and you realize that 99.9% of the ocean, nothing ever goes there. No ships, no container ships, no cruises. That's why they say that only 5% of the ocean is explored, because you just can't go to those places in the middle of the ocean. We just don't do that. And it's the same, I think, with the national parks. There are probably places in North America that no human has ever seen. And it's scary, right? And it's supposed to be scary because, again, it's the wilderness. It is the antithesis of human society. And so if you're going to go someplace, make sure to follow the recommendations of the park rangers where you're at. They don't want to have to recover your body. And there are places, I know, especially out west, where they will tell you, do not go here, here, or here. There are bears there. There are mountain lions in those places. You don't want to go out there because I don't want to have to bring your body back. So I would, if you're going to go camping, make sure it's on the beaten path. Make sure that someone knows where you're at. And make sure you follow the recommendations of the park rangers, because even if it's not something supernatural, something natural can still eat you, and you don't want to be on the menu.
Well, brothers, friends, gentlemen, thank you so much for this 2 hours and 40 minutes. Thank you, everyone in the live chat. I love you all. Bless you all. Thank you for love and support. In a little bit less than 48 hours, Christian therapist Spencer Owen will come back for the third time. We'll be talking, the whole episode will be on just one chapter from one of my former Moody Bible Institute textbooks, and the chapter will speak about lamentation. It will speak how we have lost the art in the West when it comes to lamenting, especially corporatively in the church lamenting. What does it even mean? Does it mean sign of lack of faith? Does it mean that we find God in that? How we're supposed to act? Should we hide our emotions, pain, suffering, doubts, tears? All of these things. Does it make us less manly? If we're talking about men, does it make us less having faith? Does it make us bad in the eyes of people? We'll be spending an hour and a half, because usually that's how much Spencer Owen has time, talking merely about lamenting. I just finished notes, 4 pages in Word. Like, it's not double space, it's all one line, between between the texts. So it will be heavily packed. I plan to read a lot. God help me with my throat. I will be having to take more Dayquil and NyQuil. So please pray for me. But that will be another phenomenal episode coming in just 2 days. So please come join us at 6:30 p.m. Central Time with a Christian therapist, where we'll be talking about this very pastoral, very emotional topic of suffering. And in the midst of this suffering, we should not be ashamed to express both ourselves when we're alone before God, but also before others corporately when we gather, mostly on Sundays with others, where we are suffering, where we are grieving, where we are hurting, where we are crying about something. It can be divorce, it can be a phone call about, incurable disease, or it can be someone is dying or loss of a job. Any of these things, whoever will tell you, oh, you lack faith, you shouldn't be expressing, tears and this and that, you should be just praying and fasting and believing God will bless you. Don't listen to these people. These are the topics that we'll be dealing with this Sunday. So please come, support our channel, like, subscribe, do that also on Pastor Ben's YouTube channel. And I'll see you in 2 days, and we'll see you next Friday to surprise you with another very mysterious and very creepy topic when it comes to the three of us. Until then, go serve your King, and God bless.